See, they raised 100.
My personal feeling was, I just don't know.
See, 2 full.
How much?
120. See, full call.
It's too bad. I don't like to fold for that price, but it's just too bad.
This episode of Weekly Poker Hand is from Game of Gold. Make sure you check it out if you have not already. We are playing about 1.3 million deep effective at 30,000, 60,000 blinds. So a little bit more than 22 big blinds. Fedor Holz, under the gun, also the cutoff, raises it up with the King of Spades, Jack of Hearts. Dan Cates in the small blind with King 9 of Diamonds calls. Everyone else gets out of the way. Let's see what the flop brings.
See, fortune. See, they check.
The flop comes Ace of Spades, King of Clubs, King of Hearts. Dan Cates checks, as he will do with his entire range on this board. And then Fedor Holz, with 3 of a kind, just checked it back. You may ask, why in the world would he want to check it back? Well, his hand is almost always good and very unlikely to get outdrawn. When that is the case, checking back becomes a very reasonable strategy. Next, Dan Cates is not afraid to bluff. Now, the problem with this spot is that when Fedor checks it back, I think his range looks either like a really good hand, like a king that's never folding, an ace that's trying to not fold as well, or maybe an underpair, like pocket queens. And that type of range is going to be pretty call happy. So while Cates certainly is not afraid to bluff, I'm not sure he's going to be bluffing all that often in this spot in general. I feel like this is a spot where it's just going to get checked down a lot when Fedor does have a hand like pocket queens. So I'm not sure he's going to do that many bluffs. That said, I like to check here because you want to do everything you possibly can to let Cates pick up some sort of a pair. So let it go check, check.
$270.
270.
The turn is the 6 of spades, and Dan Cates goes for roughly a pot-size bet, just trying to set up stacks to easily get it in on the river. I want to ask you the same question, though. In this scenario, what would you do in Fedor's shoes with your King-Jack? Would you call, raise minimum, or put Dan Cates all in? Take a second, think about it, and let me know what you would do in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, click the like and subscribe button, please.
Fado's like, how can I get all this guy's money? I'm just gonna make the call.
Is he gonna jam or is he gonna call?
Call.
See, they call.
This is a situation that I think a lot of people mess up by raising. In this spot, you want to do everything you possibly can to keep Dan Cates in with all of his bluffs. And yeah, some of his bluffs are going to improve to beat you some portion of the time, like flush draws. But if you give Dan Cates a hand with no showdown value on the river, he's going to feel at least somewhat inclined to bluff, especially since he's already starting to polarize his range with a relatively large turn bet. So this is a spot where Fedor's only option in my mind is to just call, and that is exactly what he does. Let's head to the river.
See, 4 bet. 700.
The river is the 10 of clubs. Dan Cates makes a very interesting play of betting 780,000 out of his 980,000 stack, leaving himself with only 200,000 behind. Kind of odd, kind of weird. I figured he would just rip it in here, although maybe keeping a tiny stack does have a little bit of merit on the off chance that he is beat. Anyway, 780. Let's see what Fedor does.
King
They
9.
call.
Okay.
After almost no thought, Fedor finds the call. He does not go for that extra 200K of value. And you may ask, why? Doesn't Fedor almost always have the best hand? And in this spot, I think he probably just does. If Cates has a king, It could be king queen, but that may rip it in pre-flop. King jack is chopping. King 10 you do lose to, but you know, it's only 200k more. But what about when he has like king 9 suited, king 8 suited? Maybe he calls like king 7 suited. In those scenarios, I think you probably want to extract the value. What about the times that he has an ace? Will he call for only 200k more? Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I suppose if Fedor thinks that his range is almost entirely a king or queen jack that will call a shove, then it doesn't make sense to shove. But I think in this spot, given there are no real payout implications for Fedor, and it's only 200k behind, it's like a tiny amount, I think Fedor probably should go for that little tiny bit of extra value. But I do understand why in this scenario calling is perhaps ideal. I do think there is a lot of merit in just getting Dan Cates out of here. You don't let him sit around with a few big blinds unless there are payout implications you can take advantage of. Now, I'm not exactly sure the payout implications in this particular table because they were variable throughout Game of Gold. But in the spot, if you will have the big stack, as Fedor will, Fedor actually does not mind keeping a short stack around. This is very different when you are early in a tournament where you don't really care about eliminating the player. But in this scenario, let me rephrase that. Early in the tournament, you don't mind eliminating players because there are no payout implications. But here, imagine Dan Cates is left with 3 or 4 big blinds, and the other 2 players have, let's say, 15 or 20 big blinds, and you're sitting there with 50. Now, Fedor can raise almost every hand and push around the other 2 middle stacks because they really want to outlast Dan Cates, who is almost certainly going to be the next one out, right? So, in this situation, it might actually be very ideal for Fedor to keep Dan Cates in. This might actually be one of those spots where Fedor had pocket kings. He should just call because he wants to keep Dan Cates in. Interesting concept that I think a lot of people do not fully grasp, but I learned this one many, many years ago, and I used to play a lot of sit and goes. If, let's say 3 people pay and 4 people remain, you really want there to be a 1 or 2 big blind stack in there because as long as they're there, you are going to be able to completely run over the middle stacks. And that's probably what Fedor recognized in this spot, and that is what he's going for. That's it for today. Enjoy your games. Have fun. Good luck. When you make trips, hope you don't lose.